I'm Rob Skinner, and this is the Rob Skinner Podcast. Today, my wife Pam and I are going to be talking about how to build a rock-solid marriage. This is the third episode in a series talking about marriage and family. Today, we're going to be talking about specifically building a rock-solid family and focus. All this and more on the Rob Skinner Podcast. Welcome back to the Rob Skinner Podcast. My goal is to inspire you to live a no-regrets life, make this life count, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. I'm here with my beautiful wife, Pam Skinner. Baby, great to have you on the program.
Oh, thanks. It's great to be here.
It's been fun doing this together.
It has been. It's been a lot of fun.
It's been really fun. Okay, so the WDS, World Discipleship Summit, only 1 week away.
Wow. Are you ready, honey?
I'm not quite packed, but I did get my class
Okay,
done.
Good. Yeah, that's the most important thing. I'll help you pack. Don't worry about that.
I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward so much to seeing people there, and a lot of people have emailed me, and we're going to be trying to get time with as many people as possible. Yeah. So if you're one of those people, looking forward to seeing you at the Discipleship Summit. And what's going to be awesome is that if we can't have a meal together, I really hope that you'll come and say hi. I just would love to give you a great big hug, say thank you for listening to the podcast. But please, I want to ask you to make a point. Let's connect a little bit. Let's just at least, let me see your face. Let me talk to you, because I want to just say thank you for listening to the Rob Skinner Podcast. Along with that, I want to give a special thanks, very deep thanks to Melanie Yu. Melanie is a disciple living in Pacifica, California, and she emailed me this past week thanking me for the podcast and how it really encouraged her and helped her to feel like she's a baby Christian all over again. And then she just said, I want to help support the podcast.
Yes, thank you, Melanie.
And so just really appreciate that. Anyway, Melanie, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Your support means a ton. Thank you. And I'm also so happy because the Rob Skinner Podcast has been downloaded, listened to over 100,000 times.
Wow, honey, that's amazing.
I know. It just makes me so happy.
Yeah.
Just to be able to help people. Mm-hmm. When I get texts from people or emails from people saying, hey, this helped me or it encouraged me or really appreciate it, I literally cut and paste those from my Google email browser. And I have a special file called my Rob Skinner encouragement file.
I love it.
And I paste it. And so if anyone's ever texted me or emailed me encouragement, I just want you to know you are in my Hall of Fame.
Wow.
Because it's there. I've got a whole file, a Word document of what you said, and it means so much to me. That's why started doing it, just to help people and just to know that it's encouraging you means the world to me.
I love that.
I really appreciate all the emails, texts I've gotten. Encourage me to keep it going. If you'd like to support the podcast moving forward, I'm going to start a Patreon community where you can get early episode releases, bonus episodes, additional material to help you multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. And when I get that going, I hope you'll join the community. It'll be a lot of fun just to stay connected in a greater way. So we're going to go ahead and get into the episode right now. It's Rock Solid Family and Focus. And there are 2 points to this class. It's family matters and focus. You ready to get into it, baby?
I'm so ready.
Okay.
Yes.
I want to talk first of all to the men about becoming the family man, the family man. Now, this is not a full-blown parenting class. This is overall really more focused on marriage, but parenting has, a strong application in marriage, and you can't avoid it. They're overlapping in some ways. But your wife needs to feel that you're leading the family and the kids.
Right. Oh, boy. Absolutely. Wouldn't that, isn't that one of the biggest complaints that we consistently hear from couples, unfortunately?
It's probably the number one complaint.
I think so. I think it is.
That my husband's not leading me spiritually, not leading the family, doesn't read the Bible, just not there, is passive, is not active. Not engaged. Mm-hmm. It's like the Incredibles, that cartoon show.
That's right. That's a great
from Pixar. It's like engage, Bob.
Engage, Bob. Yeah.
It's like
That is perfect.
So many husbands are just, they're not engaged.
They're not.
Their body is there, but their mind is elsewhere. They're not engaged in the family. And so that's what's so important. Your wife needs to feel you are leading the family and the kids.
Absolutely.
In Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4 through 9, it says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates." Jesus says this includes really the most important commandment. This is it. I mean, number one, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And it's interesting how Moses ties that in with the family.
Right.
I mean, it's inseparable. You can't just be like, oh, I've got my own relationship with God. He says, listen, all these things, you've got to impress them on your children.
Right.
It's not enough just for you to be a spiritual Lone Ranger. It's got to be your kids, your wife.
Right. And I love that, where it's like, it doesn't say, okay, as long as you talk about the Bible, 5 minutes during the week, right? I mean, you are going to talk about having devotionals. Those are important. But when it says, talk about it when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up.
Right.
I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot of the time where it's natural.
Right.
That's what really stands out to me. It's what you're doing with your life.
Exactly.
It's when you're doing the dishes. It's when you're putting the kids to bed. It's when you're eating. It's when you're driving them to school.
Right.
There should be a sense of, this is a great opportunity for me to talk about God, share scripture, just try and engage with the kids spiritually.
Exactly. And I think you can do it without being hyper religious.
Right.
You're there to train and to raise your family, especially you as a man. And your wife is going to respect you as you take care of the family.
Absolutely.
I think it starts with time, just making the time for your family, not letting your job get out of control. And this is where boundaries start to blur. When you're working from home, I mean, you can just spend all your time working and not engaging with the kids.
Right.
Email, phone calls, texting, and your business just kind of runs into your life.
Right. And how about even having dinner together, right? We're going to talk about that, how important that is.
Right.
But then if everybody's on their phones,
Right.
if everybody's texting, if everybody's, checking their reels on Instagram, it's like that. It's ridiculous, And so even that, just going, okay, we're going to be intentional about focusing on the people that we're having dinner with.
Right. Now, I think family devotionals is something that back in the 80s and 90s, that was talked about a lot. And the concept was you sit down, you have a little Bible. It's kind of like a Bible talk for your family.
Right.
I mean, you've got like a lesson, you've got 3 points, you've got illustrations.
Where's the craft? You need to have a craft and a snack.
and to be honest, I remember just as a dad, just going, now I'm a preacher by trade. So it's, I prepare lessons for my living. But still, I'd feel like, oh my gosh, this is a lot to do a family devotional. And I remember you shared something that Bob Tranchel shared with you. Maybe
Yeah, I remember Bob was saying that, sometimes those devotionals become more like correctionals. Sit down, everybody pay attention, and then you're excusing yourself to give spankings or timeouts. And it's just like, and then you're like, okay, oh, wow, this is a real spiritual time. We all felt,
Exactly.
And so I thought that was a good point. We got to kind of adjust things, and figure out what works for each family, but I think sometimes we do have this high expectation, it's got to be amazing every single week. It's got to be an hour long. And it's like, wow, that might not be what's the best.
Right. And I think what helped me was simply making it simpler and realizing, okay, one, we're going to have dinner together every night.
Yes.
That's huge. And
huge.
Many families, they don't eat together.
Right.
They just don't. Kids come in and graze and take it back into their rooms and they're watching TV. And I go, if you're letting that happen in your family, you need to correct that.
Exactly.
Because the time at family dinners is absolutely invaluable. Your kids are there, they're focused, you ask them to put away the phones or you collect the phones beforehand. And I think making it simple, just by starting like, hey, I want to share a scripture I read today in my quiet time.
Right.
And just reading it to your kids and say, this is how it impacted me.
Right.
You guys have any thoughts on that? What do you think about that? And then just trying to develop a spiritual discussion.
Right. I think that's made a huge difference. And I also love, we've made it a habit, the high low. Okay, let's talk about our day. Get the kids to start talking. Right? Because it's funny, once they get to middle school and high school, all of a sudden it's like they've got a 3-word vocabulary. It's a lot of grunting, like how's your day? And so trying to get them to talk, get them to share. Creating ways where they feel comfortable doing that.
Exactly.
But I love that, it wasn't every single night, but when, a couple times a week, you would read a scripture, and it wasn't like, it hadn't been so long, right, that the kids are like, uh-oh, what's Dad doing? Oh, he's getting out the Bible. We're in trouble. I loved that you just made it where it's just normal. Like, Dad's going to read the Bible. He's going to share something from his quiet time, and we're going to discuss it. And honestly, even when our kids were in college, we were fortunate enough to have our kids go to the University of Arizona, and, family time, the kids knew. And to be honest, there might be some like, oh, Dad, but it's like, no, this is what we're about. We are a spiritual family.
Right.
And so guess what? We're going to read the Bible together.
Exactly. I mean, there were times when eyeballs were rolled. Like, oh gosh, oh my. And there were times when I would lapse and not do it. And then they would like, oh, what's going on here? But then I would just go ahead and do it, especially as they got older.
Right.
But I think it's just so important. You've got to have that mindset saying, listen, sitting down, going outside the house, inside the house, lying down, on a walk, you're going to talk about God. He's got to be part of the conversation.
Right. And then I'd also add that when the kids were little, we just made it fun. Yeah. I think probably one of the most fun family devotionals is when you would dress up as Goliath, and you'd get, I don't know, a hockey mask and a football helmet, and you'd come in and the kids would just find all their Nerf balls, right? And throw them at you and you'd fall down. And they just thought that was awesome, But, so you can make it fun. But I think it is a great time for training. And when we would have people over for dinner, one of the things, right, that we would train our kids is that you need to engage with adults.
Great point.
It just, and that was so helpful is you would prepare the kids. We'd talk to the kids. Okay, everybody, 3 questions. Okay, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, this family's coming over. And you've got to come up with 3 questions.
Right.
And it was awesome.
Right.
Even sometimes I remember our kids would be like, hey, Mrs. Jones, what's your favorite color? Right? Random. Right. But they learned that that's what you do. You don't just sit there.
Right.
You're not just a lump. You engage. You get interested, even at a very young age, training your children to get interested in others.
Right.
It's not all about them. Right? When you welcome somebody into your home. And I loved that. And that was a really important time where the kids are like, hey, what do you do for work?
Yes.
What are your hobbies?
That was great because what we did is we provided them with the questions to ask. Like, what do you do for work?
Right.
What do you do? What do you like to do for fun? Right. Do you have any hobbies?
Right.
What sports do you like to watch? And so these questions that they had that they needed to ask, it was great, and it became part of their skill set.
Right, absolutely.
And I see a lot of kids that when they're around adults, they do not engage with adults at all.
No, they don't. There's no eye contact.
No.
It really stands out.
It really does.
When I've gone to different conferences and I've met different families, and when those kids come up, and you don't have to give hugs, but when there's eye contact, when there's like hi, I just go, wow.
Yeah, it totally stands out.
It really stands out.
Yeah, so that was very, very helpful. And I think that's a lot happens around the dinner table. And I think sharing highs and lows is always good. We go to that probably the most often, like, hey, let's share a high and a low.
Right.
What's going on that's good and what's challenging.
Right. And I also think even recently, I love what you'll do is say, okay, guess what we're going to do? Everybody's going to go and encourage the person to the right.
Right.
And, I mean, gosh, probably did that a month ago,
Right.
just keeping that habit of, just talking, sharing, building each other up,
Right.
making that a habit.
Exactly.
So
And
important.
it's funny how it seems a little mechanistic, a little structured, and yet once people start encouraging each other,
Right.
everyone gets fired up.
Right. The whole mood changes.
No matter how you started it, the fact that you're getting encouraged, everyone's like, wow, that was awesome. It builds
true.
a loving atmosphere.
It really, really does.
And it goes back to that passage in Hebrews 10. Let's encourage one another. Let's consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think having quiet times with the kids, trying to help them to read the Bible, knowing what to read. We'd get, children's Bibles, different things like that. But I think one of the things too is your kids need to see you reading and praying.
Right.
They need to know that you actually have quiet times.
Mm-hmm.
And it concerns me when I talk to Kingdom kids and they're not into the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not. And I go, where's that come from? Maybe it's their parents weren't into the Bible.
Right. I know. It's super, super concerning.
Yeah. So we're talking about, being a family man.
Yeah.
That's kind of the topic here. And so spending time with your family, having family devotionals, having dinners with your kids, quiet times. These are just ideas that you can take away. Camping. Let's talk a little bit about this.
Camping.
I want to share this quote. I read this from a book. We were living in Fukuoka, Japan, which is on the western island of Kyushu. This is probably 1998 or something. And my kids were real young, all less than 5. And I read this book by Gary Smalley, and he's like the master of family. He's like up there with Charles Dobson. But he said several years ago, we interviewed healthy families across the country and asked them each the same question. What do you believe is the main reason you are all so close and happy as a family? What we found amazed us. Each family gave basically the same answer. We do a lot of activities together. Upon further study, we discovered these families also had one particular activity in common: camping. Instead, we believe that the secret to being a close-knit family almost always can be found in camping because two very important things happen. One, close-knit relationships result from people sharing numerous experiences. Two, close relationships form after dealing with difficulties in a positive manner. Now, after I read this, I immediately, just immediately bought a ton of camping equipment. Now, we were living in Japan. I had a little delivery van that had a 600cc motorcycle engine in it. And we threw all our kids, no seatbelts in that car. And we would travel all over Kyushu, and we went camping.
Yeah.
The first time we went camping, it was Christmas time. Yeah. It was right before New Year's. And we said, hey, let's go down to Kumamoto. And so we were driving around, didn't have a place to camp.
No,
we thought,
we
we'll
didn't.
just find a ryokan, like a traveler's inn. Well, they're all booked up because that's the huge holiday
It was
there
a
in
big,
Japan.
big weekend.
So we were like Joseph and Mary, couldn't find any place in the inn. And so I'm like, what are we going to do? It was totally booked up. And so we had climbed up to a place called Mount Aso, which is a caldera or a former volcano. And so it's high elevation and cold.
Yeah.
It was like below freezing. So I'm like, I've got my daughter who's like less than 1 year old.
Right.
I've got a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, plus my sister-in-law who's visiting.
That's right. My sister Vicky, she was there. Little shout out to her. Thank you.
and I didn't know where to go. Couldn't. It was like 9 or 10 at night.
Yeah.
I'm like, what am I going to do? So I found this research station for, I think it was Kyushu Daigaku University, and it was like agricultural research station. So we just pulled in there, just squatted, set up a tent, and laid it out. And my sister-in-law and aunt slept in the van.
Yeah, they did.
And we, at that point, I don't think we even had full size.
No, we had a tent, what I remember. I don't think we went full out and got the sleeping bags yet. We just brought blankets.
We just had blankets for the house.
Yeah.
And when we woke up in the morning, everyone was cold, and it was like frost all over the tent.
Yes, we made a memory.
Oh, and see, that's the point. It says close relationships form after dealing with difficulties in a positive.
Yes.
It's one of my best memories because it was awesome. About a kilometer down the road was one of the biggest onsens or hot springs in the country.
Right.
And so they had a huge buffet that morning, and it was just like,
It was awesome.
awesome. We jumped in that hot water. It was incredible.
It was.
But anyway, a lot of times families and dads are like, I don't camp.
Right.
I don't want to camp. It's not comfortable. Why would you want to do it? And that's kind of part of it is like, there's been so many times I go, I hate this. This is, why do I have to pack all this stuff up?
It's a ton of work.
Headache.
Right.
Kids can't get out of the house on time or late. And then you get out there and the kids are grumbling.
Right.
Because
Where's
there's
my
no
Xbox? There, oh yeah.
But after, a couple hours, all of a sudden you get into this zone where you're really spending great time with your family, and it's awesome. And then things come up that are unexpected, but it just builds a memory.
It does. It does. I mean, remember that time we went camping, all the kids in the tent? And I mean, we tell stories. I remember that one time, I think we were in Southern Oregon, where there was like the biggest, electric storm?
Yes.
Remember that?
3,000 lightning strikes in one night.
Okay, I really thought we're going to have to just pack it up here and go home, right? It was scary. And I thought, is this tent, it's really testing the tent. How's this tent going to do? And then, I mean, you got to tell it, what happened the next morning. It's classic.
Right, because all night long, I mean, the lightning, the thunder is just flashing, and just these peals of thunder sounded like a 30-06 going off right outside, just a deer rifle right outside your tent, and you're separated by a little skinny nylon right outside. And Pam and I are like, oh my gosh, I hope we make it through the night.
Yes.
Kids wake up the next morning, I say, kids, what'd you think about last night? They're like, what?
Like, which part?
About all the noise. Really? What happened? They slept all the way through.
I'll never forget that.
Anyway, here's my friendly challenge for you. If you're not into camping, get into it.
Yeah.
Try it. Mm-hmm. It probably won't go perfectly the first time, but it will definitely build a memory, whether it goes well or if it's more challenging.
Right.
But you spend that great time, 48 hours together, man, awesome.
Awesome. And maybe if you're not into tent camping, you can rent a cabin.
Sure.
You can take it whatever level you want. Just that time together.
It's huge.
It's invaluable.
It's huge. It's been awesome. Mm-hmm. That was great advice from Gary Smalley.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to turn this over to my wife here, and she's going to talk a little bit about stuff for women.
Thanks, honey. Yeah, I want to address the wives because, our role, right? We have a very specific role that God gave us, and that is to be a suitable helper, to be your husband's, soulmate, his helper, to build him up, to be his biggest fan. And that is just huge. And I think for me, growing up, I didn't grow up in a religious family. And so that whole idea of like supporting a man, I've shared about that. But to think about, okay, either I can build him up or tear him down. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can have that kind of an influence on you where I could either be a really negative influence or really positive influence. And that really, it was eye-opening for me to think, okay, wow, God has given me a really special, specific role in my marriage, but then also with the family to make sure that my husband is respected, that the kids see that, and that, it's important for Rob to feel like, okay, when he comes home, this is his home. It's my home too, but this has got to be his sanctuary. And a lot of that, I think, really falls on the women to create that environment, how we talk about our husbands, how we talk to our husbands, just really being a positive influence, being that suitable helper. And of course, your husband, I mean, you're a great help around the house, but I don't think I ever feel like tapping my toes like, hey, honey, you better, come on. Now, of course, there's certain things, taking out the trash, putting gas in the car, right? There's certain things that, yes, you do. But I feel like that's really my responsibility to set the tone in the home, to make it warm, to make it fun. And so I think that's really important. And then, when you walk through the door, I want to make sure that you feel welcomed. And, there's times, right, where maybe you haven't come home on time, and that can be tricky, right? Because, in my sinful nature, I'll want to maybe not be so happy, but just to realize, okay, I got to change that and not say, where have you been? But man, it's so good to have you back home. I'm glad you're finally home.
Right.
Just creating that environment, I think, is just really important for the woman to take that responsibility to create that environment, to be that suitable helper.
Exactly. I mean, that makes me feel so special when I feel like, hey, my house is clean. Mm-hmm. It smells nice. It's organized. And you're an amazing cook. I mean, just amazing. It's just, I love having people over for dinner. You just do an amazing job. And you make the house just a place I want to be back, come home to. So you do a fantastic job. And, and we run into families where, there's more of kind of like a business relationship going on. I think it's easy to fall into that in COVID because you're together a lot more.
Exactly.
And we just recently had, some people over and their marriage fell apart. They weren't disciples, but their marriage fell apart because of COVID, just being all together all the time. It just didn't work out.
Right. It's sad.
Yeah. Just weren't used to it.
Right. And I think also with COVID, if like, for example, if a couple, the husband and wife, if they are working at home, right, then it could be really easy to take each other for granted.
Exactly.
You see each other all the time. So there's not the like, hey, I've really missed you. Oh, I'm so glad, you're back. Instead of that, just like, oh, well, he's kind of always here.
Yeah.
And I think we got to make sure that we're really appreciating each other, not taking each other for granted.
Right. So this section was on family, focus on the family, building the family, being a family man. I think here's the challenge is like you can be great family builders. You can do the very best job you can. It doesn't guarantee your kids are always going to be perfect. They're going to be sinners, guaranteed.
Yes.
But you need to do the best you can. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think that's the focus is, are you doing the best you can?
Right.
And then you got to leave the rest up to God and just pray for your kids. And I know there's many, many great parents that are having challenges with their kids.
Right.
And I go, they're still great parents.
Right. Absolutely.
Still great parents.
Yes.
It's just a sinful world. Every person's got to decide for themselves whether they're going to follow God.
Right. Absolutely. Well said.
So want to encourage you out there.
Yes.
Just continue. Focus on doing your best. Mm-hmm. Do the best you can with what you have, and God will bless you.
Absolutely.
Okay, I want to switch to focus. Okay, this is the final point in this whole series, focus. There's an 80-20 rule called the Pareto principle. There's an Italian economist named Wilfredo Pareto, and he came up with this, and he noticed that about 20% of the landowners owned about 80% of the land in Italy. And he went on, and other writers have come along and basically developed this concept that 20% of the people own 80% of the wealth. And can even be stronger than that. But it's important to know that 20% of the things you're doing in your family and your marriage will be useful to build up your marriage. The other 80% adds little or may even work against you.
That's interesting.
And so it's really important for you to figure out, hey, what's working?
Right.
So what I'd like you to do, if you're driving, don't worry about it, but maybe later, write down 3 things that are currently working. And go, okay, what's working now? Those things should be on your keep doing list.
Right.
Just figure out, okay, we're having meals together.
Right.
I'm having quiet times. Whatever it might be, whatever you're doing well. I know for sure you're doing some things well. Yeah. Keep doing those things, and keep that on your keep doing list. And then write down 2 things that you'd like to start or implement in your life from what we've gone over the past 3 classes. That's your start doing list. And so just, take that and show it to your wife or your husband and say, hey, here's 3 things we're doing well. Let's pat ourselves on the back. Mm-hmm. Here's 2 things I think we could do.
Yeah. I think that's great. That's really, really helpful.
And then after you do that, then you need to know what to stop. Okay, I know you're busy.
Yeah.
Okay, that goes without saying. You're a busy person. You're trying to do it all, and you're not just living for TV or whatever. You're living to make disciples, to make this life count.
Right.
So I know you're busy. You might even be swamped and feel overwhelmed. It's hard, if not impossible, to add more to your life oftentimes.
Right.
Unless you stop doing things that you're currently doing.
Right.
And so you need to ask yourself, what are some things that you could stop doing that would open up more space in your life for love, communication, time with your kids, sex, any of those things that are valuable that you go, okay, these things really matter. Yeah. Let me just give you some ideas, like Netflix binging. Okay. Maybe it's not the time to just go through all the episodes of Stranger Things. Okay. Maybe you got some work to do. Hey, we love TV, we love movies and stuff like that, but you got to go, okay, how many hours do we spend a week watching this?
Right.
Maybe it's time to put that on the stop doing list for a while. Too much media, late night computer browsing. Yeah. Maybe there's a pornography issue. Too much golf. Maybe you're addicted to golf. Video games, big box shopping, drinking.
Go easy there.
Drinking too much, spending too much overtime at work, multi-level marketing. Maybe you're just going after making the big bucks, day trading. I don't know what it might be for you, but you need to ask yourself, okay, what's competing? What is absorbing my time and attention? You currently have a routine in place. That's going to have to change if you want to improve and grow spiritually, especially as it affects your marriage and your family. So take some time this week to make a stop doing list. This is so valuable because if you can just open up a little more space, it will improve your marriage and your family tremendously. Yeah. I remember at the beginning of COVID, I was just like going double. You'd think that with COVID, everything would slow down. I just felt like I was on skates. Yeah. And Pam, I said, how are we doing? Just kind of had that talk, like, how do you feel like we're doing, baby? And she said, you're so busy. And I was like, oops. Yeah. And that was like a yellow flag. It's like, okay, I got to slow down. I'm trying to do too much. I'm just anxious. I'm worried about the church. I'm worried about the people in it. And I don't know what to focus on. So I'm just trying to do everything.
Right.
And I think that really helped me to go, okay, I got to slow down, get back to the things that really matter the most.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I think that was important because again, coming out of COVID, right. Things are so different,
right.
And we were trying to navigate it. And then, it's just a really, really challenging time, but just making sure that we're intentional, that we're doing the things that we were doing before and not just not paying attention to them.
Exactly. Successful marriages have certain habits that make them successful.
Right.
So the opportunity you have is to make a change now and to build your marriage daily until it becomes habitual.
Yeah. I remember when we were living in Japan and one of the couples that was in Tokyo, Greg and Shelley Metten. Right? Oh, I know.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Okay, well, actually, that's another story, I think, for another time. But they had a huge influence on our lives and our parenting, and I'm so grateful for them. But do you remember the advice they gave us that because life was so busy, right, with our 3 kids and the ministry, trying to do it all, that they suggested that after dinner that we'd have what's called a coffee time. And that we would train the children and let the kids know, hey, listen, after dinner, mom and dad are sitting on the couch,
right? And
it's just mom and dad time,
right?
And it was, and the kids could go watch a video, but they couldn't interrupt us. They needed to go and, start their homework or play together. But that was our time to be able to connect. Hey, how was your day? How were your appointments?
Right.
What's going on the rest of the week? Like, I felt like that was such a special time. I mean, I can just kind of go back to that apartment and that futon couch right there where we would sit and just connect. And I really needed that. I needed that from you, but I also think it was just a great opportunity to let our kids know, okay, listen, mom and dad, we were here first. And this is really important that we're unified, that we stay connected. Right. And for the kids to, again, another opportunity to let them know, the world does not revolve all around them.
Exactly. So you have routines already going on in your marriage, whether it's going to the gym or being on a diet or going to church regularly, having quiet times, maybe a date night. You might have sinful habits that are part of your life. Are you ready for a great marriage? You've got to ask yourself, am I ready to make a change to have a great marriage? And I just go, listen, marriage is a gift from God.
Right.
I mean, it's been given to us in this meaningless life.
Right. Absolutely.
To enjoy life with your wife. And it takes maintenance and attention. You can't keep expecting more out of your relationship without taking care of it. I think about a time with my son, David, and he had come back and brought a car back, and the car wasn't in good shape. And we took it to the mechanic, and I said, son, you got to take care of these things. And he said, I'm sorry, Dad. And so we got the car fixed. And so we're driving home that night in my truck, and the engine blew. It was rattling. I had to pull over the side of the freeway. We towed it back to the very same mechanic we'd just been with half an hour earlier. And the mechanic had helped me. He'd taken a look at this used car and had helped me to buy it a year earlier. And he said, hey, Rob, remember when we bought this? I said, it's going to need an oil change really soon. Did you ever get the oil changed? I was quiet. Guess what?
Nope.
It was a Toyota pickup, and I thought I just was busy with other things, and I did not get an oil change, and guess what? Engine seized up. I was eating humble pie. There's my son right there. I mean, it's like talk about
life lesson right
instant
there.
Instant judgment right there. And I had to apologize to him later, like, oh, son, I didn't take my own advice. But it's the same thing in your marriage. You can think, oh, we're good.
Right.
My wife's awesome. We're doing fine.
She's like a Toyota.
She's just
going to keep going.
Keep on track. But listen, if you don't maintain your marriage, you'll end up on the side of the road.
Right.
A statistic: divorced, unhappy, empty.
Right.
So let me leave you with a tool that'll help you to make each day of your marriage together a masterpiece. And if you work on this over the next 90 days, guess what? You're going to see some improvement. First of all, this comes from John Gottman's book, The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. And he talks about the 5 magic hours. Now, Pam's talked about this, given a little preview. But if you devote 5 hours a week to your marriage, you're going to see steady improvement. First of all, when you leave, partings and departures, 2 minutes a day. Spend 2 minutes per day warmly and intentionally leaving from your spouse for work, the gym, or social activities. So basically you say, hey, listen, this is what's going on today. And Pam will say, what are you doing today? What's your plan? What are your appointments? And just 2 minutes a day. And 10 minutes, that's only 10 minutes a week. And then you give each other a 6-second kiss. Not just a little peck, but like 6 seconds. That's a good solid kiss.
Right. And that's where the kids come up and go, ew, gross, Mom and Dad.
I know. So that's something you can do. It's part of the 5 magic hours. Second, greetings and arrivals. Now, this is what Pam talked about at the coffee talk.
Yeah.
At some point shortly after your return home from work or daily activity, spend 20 minutes debriefing about the events of the day. Spending 20 minutes per weekday is an hour and 40 minutes per week. You could do that.
Yeah.
You could
so
do
important.
Just catching up. What happened today? How are you doing?
Right.
Basically, you're just keeping your love maps up to date.
Yeah.
You're in touch with each other. You know each other's lives. Then the third thing, physical affection. Physical affection, 5 minutes a day.
Yeah.
What's that mean? It means like hugging, touching, kissing,
holding
hands, sitting on the couch, snuggling.
Right.
You got to keep that going.
Right.
I see couples, they don't hold hands, they don't touch each other. You wouldn't know they're really married by their physical affection.
Right. Gosh.
Next thing, admiration, affirmation, and compliments, 5 minutes a day. Taking time aside to say, honey, you look beautiful. You look great. I love that top you're wearing right now.
Right. It's so important.
Man, just coming up with ways to do that. And then finally, a weekly date, just 2 hours a week. Now, I like to go longer than 2 hours a week, but at least 2 hours a week where you get out away from the kids and you go do something fun together.
Absolutely.
All these things are super, super helpful. And once you develop a habit about it, it becomes a lot easier to maintain.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the whole admiration, affirmation, and compliments. I feel like that's definitely something that we've made a habit. And I love, and maybe we already discussed this, but the whole idea of like, hey, do you have a minute for me to build you up?
I love that.
I know. And it's like, no matter what you're doing, you always have time. I always have time to stop.
Right.
But just looking for those areas to stress the positive when we catch each other doing great things.
Exactly.
To just go, hey, wow, the way you just had that appointment, or the way, wow, you talked to our son was so loving, and you were so patient.
Right.
Just always just looking for the positive and not just taking it for granted,
Exactly.
but really acknowledging it and expressing it, saying, man, way to go, honey. You're a great dad.
Yeah. I love that when you do that. And, sometimes we can feel uncomfortable, like, oh, this is kind of awkward.
Right.
Any new habit is going to seem awkward initially.
Good point, honey.
But it's so worth it once you can develop it into a regular habit. It won't seem awkward after a while, and it'll provide incredible benefits. Yeah. So that finishes our class on having a rock solid marriage. I hope it's really helped you. We've gone through 3 episodes. If you have questions about it, man, just email us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Be glad to answer some in the future episodes. If you've got some advice you want or ideas, go ahead and just email me at rob@robskinner.com. Just email me, rob@robskinner.com. Thank you so much for joining the Rob Skinner podcast. If you're enjoying this podcast, please hit the subscribe button and let your friends know about it and how to find it. Because my goal is to inspire you to make this life count, live a no regrets life, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Have a great day and make this life count.